Well, hey guys, good morning. It is so good to see all of you this morning, and I'm just glad you're here. We are going to do a one-off message today. Every year, I either do a 3-week series or a 1-week message talking about how we are, our whole 4 initiative, which I know Caleb talked to you about all of the generosity with that this year. And it's who we are. It's the heartbeat of our church. We like to say that so often churches are known for what they're against and not what they're for. And we want to be a church that's known for what we're for. And what we're for is people, because Jesus is for people, so we're for people. And of course, we do that day in, day out. We are in our community all the time, trying to love this community. And then this disaster hits in our region, and you guys stepped up in a really big way. You have given money, you have given time, you've volunteered in all sorts of different ways. And I want to say it again, I'm proud to be your pastor, proud of you guys for doing that, because it's what you do. I was talking to one individual, and he said, here I was, my house was flooded, and we're getting ready to clean up, and I didn't know who was going to help me. And then he said, I turned around, and these people from Pinnacle showed up. He said, and of course they did, because it's what you guys do. And I said, yep, it's what we do. We just love people. Yeah, you can clap. That's cool. But here's the thing. As we talk about that, I feel like there's a balance to it, okay? Because if you're going to be for people, if you're going to be for a community, you also have to be wise enough to be also for yourself, because I would say right now there's this thing they call the disaster curve. And the first 3 weeks of a disaster like we've been through, people are helping, they're on a high. The first week it's just like, what do we got to do? And there's adrenaline going, and then there's just trying to figure out ways and help people and all that, and you're up high on the mountain, right? But then after about 3 or 4 weeks, people start to go down the curve and get down in the trough. And there can be all kinds of emotions that come about from being in that trough. For some people, it can be cynicism, because maybe the help's not coming as quick as they think. For some people, it's huge amount of fatigue. For some people, even though they may have helped, they start to feel guilt because they look around and they're like, well, I came out fairly unscathed and my neighbors didn't. And for other people, it can be depression. So somewhere along the way, there's going to be lots of emotions. And one thing is I think too, if you've helped people, if you care at all, you're going to go through that range of emotions, and you're going to get what counselors call compassion fatigue. You can get so worn out from caring. And so what I want to talk about today is that, because we as a church, you're the church, not just the organization, as people, as individuals, I would say that if you're honest, everybody in here at some level, we went through some emotions. And I want to talk about how we can continue to be for people, but not burn yourself out. And so we're going to go to Galatians to do that, because actually Paul has something to say about this. So Galatians chapter 6, and we're going to start with verse 9. All right, here we go. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. So Paul here right off the bat he's at least, recognizing the reality that you can get weary, i.e. tired, in doing good. And of course, it's doing good. It's helping people. It's being the hands and feet of Jesus, being Jesus in a community. It's not just evangelism. It's not just preaching. It's actually doing good, doing things, right? And Paul says there, you can become weary. It's interesting, if you look at the Greek word there for weary, tired, it's not so much a physical exhaustion as it is a mental and an emotional exhaustion. So you can read this verse and you can think Paul is saying, don't get mentally and emotionally wore out doing good. Let us not do that. And if you look in the verse, I'm going to tell you how to not get weary in just a second. But Paul tells us something very important here. He said, don't get emotionally and mentally wore out doing good. Why? He says, because you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. So what Paul's saying here is he's saying there has to be a perseverance. I'm going to keep doing good as long as I live. And knowing that the seed I sow is going to bring a harvest. Now, I say that, right? And you could take me wrong when I said that. Because you could think, oh, he's just saying that even though I'm feeling this way, even though I'm wore out in my mind, even though I'm dealing with some stuff, that he's basically saying, I just got to suck it up, right? And keep getting at it. And that is not what I'm saying at all. And I don't think that's what Paul is saying. What Paul's going to do is he's going to show us in a second how we're to do this in a way so that we don't become weary. Because it's implied when you read the verse, he's saying, don't get wore out doing these things, right? But he says in there that if you persevere, if you don't give up, there's a harvest. And that tells me something. Here's something we got to understand. And it's this: good things grow when you don't give up. When you're willing to continue to press on in whatever endeavor it is, and this can apply to not just what we're talking about today, you will see growth if you're willing to stick with it. And in the same way, okay, when he says there's a harvest, if we persevere, if we continue to do good, if we continue to try to be Jesus in people's lives as individuals and as a church, Paul says you will see a harvest. And now that harvest can come in different forms. One, as a church, is for a community, you begin to see good things in the community. You begin to see people help. You see people happier. You see relationships healed. Another thing is you introduce people to Christ. The walls begin to tear down. They begin to see the people of Jesus differently, and by extension, they see Christ differently. That happens. And also, though, sometimes you may not see the results immediately. You may not see the wins from the good you're doing, but there is a harvest going on inside of you. You cannot live this out and your character not be changed. I know, talking to many people, I know for me, one thing that's been brought about in these last few weeks is simply gratitude. It's gratitude for just what I have for being alive. I don't know, many of you feel that way. And even folks I know who've lost a lot, they say, I'm still grateful because it could be worse than it is. And so that goes on. But I also want to say this. Sometimes those seeds that you're sowing, right, waiting for that harvest of blessing that Paul's talking about here, it can take a long time. And Paul's trying to encourage and say, even though it may take a long time, stick with it. Back when I was a teacher, and I can't believe I'm about to say how many years ago, it's been over 23 years since I taught in a classroom as a teacher. I don't like saying that because it dates me, right? But I remember when I taught and when I coached, I wanted the kids to learn social studies and science. That's what I taught. Also wanted them to have fun while I taught social studies and science. And so that's why I blew a hole in the wall at Canton Middle that I think is still there. So my mark is still there. But more importantly than that for me, though I wanted them to learn, I wanted the kids that I interacted with to know that at least one adult in their life cared, and I wanted them to grow, and what little bit I put in their life, it would help them later on to be just good citizens and people. And I got to admit now, okay, that sometimes that could be a little frustrating because you'd have some little guys and gals that you'd be like, man, I don't know if you're getting this right now. Those would be those hard conversations out in the hall. Or those would be those times when you're like, man, you're really screwing up here. I can't say what I would say. Anyways, you're thinking that way. But then, I go on, it's been years. You wonder. And then I'm sitting here on a Sunday, and somebody I taught comes walking in the door with their children. And you begin to talk, you see the person they are, you see the parent they are, you see the good they're doing, you see who they've become, and you know that even though it was not all you, it was a combination of all kinds of things, that bit of time you had there made a difference. And so that Paul is saying, right? Don't give up. Stick with it. Continue to do good. Even when sometimes you think, is this mattering? It does matter. It matters. It matters because Jesus is for people, and if you follow Jesus, you got to be for people too. Now, Paul, of course, says, don't get weary. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to give you 3 things that you need to do and I need to do. Here's the first one. You got to give yourself space to recharge. It's implied to me when Paul says, let us not become weary, that there's certain things we need to do to not become mentally, emotionally, and physically wore out. And one of those things is rest and recharging. The issue is, though, when you're in a community that experiences, or a region that experienced what we've experienced, right? You can, when you want to go and do something that recharges your batteries, or you want to take a break, and what inherently will happen is you will feel guilty for taking a break. Or you'll feel guilty for going and doing something you love. And I want to say to you, you don't got to feel guilty. You need to give yourself time to do that. And everybody in this room, we recharge in different ways. And it's okay. Jesus himself, right? The Son of God, God in the flesh. You can read in the Gospels, it said multiple times, what would he do? He would get away from the crowds. He would take a break from doing good to go and get away and pray and recharge and spend time with his Father in heaven. And so if the perfect Son of God had to do that, then I think we definitely need to do that. And so I'm telling you, give yourself permission to do that. But then notice Paul goes on in this verse and he says something here. Look what he says in verse 10. He says, therefore, and the therefore, he's like, therefore, because I've just told you not to get weary in doing good. Therefore, because I've told you good things grow when you don't give up. Therefore, because of that, look what he says. He says, as we have opportunity, let us do good. A lot going on there. I want you to know something. He says, when you have the opportunity, you do good. And what's inherently there is this. Paul is trying to tell us a principle there. And the principle is, and it's this. You got to focus on who is in front of you. Why do I say that? Because one of the reasons I think so many people get burned out, wore out, get compassion fatigue is because we think we can change the entire world. And you can't. We can't even change this entire community, though we're going to try. But you have to pay attention to the opportunities. And when he says that, that means that you just focus on what God puts in front of you for the moment. You don't got to worry about helping everybody. You help as individuals who's put in front of you. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Do for one what you wish you could do for all. And when we all do that, we're going to do a lot for all. And so you focus on the opportunity that's in front of you. And sometimes that opportunity can come in the form of you may be sitting there and the opportunity is you've got time on your hands. And like some people who are out of state are like, I see this disaster. I've got time. I've got resources. The opportunity and what's in front of me is I need to get in my truck and go up there with my chainsaw and do something. For some people, the opportunity that was in front of them when they saw and seen what happened here was, I've been financially blessed. I've been given those kinds of resources. So I'm going to give that way. Let's focus on what's in front of you. For some of us, it was to come and use our gifts and our talents in all the different ways. Some of you went and you mucked out houses. Some of you cut down trees. Some of you delivered supplies. Hey, we have one lady who goes to church here. Her gifting is she's a cook. She's been a caterer for years. And so what she did for 2 weeks straight, every day she was here cooking for the volunteers and the National Guard and the FEMA folks that were upstairs working out of her church. And she just did that. And I went up to her one day and I said, Julie, we are so blessed. And thank you so much for feeding us. Matter of fact, I told her, I said, you sure you can't just come do this every day? Because this feels like when I was in the Marines and I had the chow hall and I didn't have to worry about what I had to eat. And you know, I've never had a bad meal from the woman. But she said this. She said, Heath, you don't got to thank me. I said, but I'm going to. She said, this is what I love to do. This is my gifting. This was something I could do. This was the opportunity in front of her for the moment. And when you do that, you're not trying to be what you're not, and you do what's been put in front of you, it's one of the ways, I think Paul's saying, that you don't become weary in doing good. But I want you to notice, and this is my favorite part of the verse, what he says next. He says, when you have opportunity, let us do good. And what? Let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. I want to work backwards here, okay? First thing he said, let's do good. We're to do good things. And a lot of times in churches, we think that the only thing we exist for is to have worship services and do discipleship groups and evangelize. We are meant to do that, but we're also meant to do so much more. We're meant to be out in the community doing good, being the hands and feet of Jesus. That's the doing, right? But notice here, he says you're to do good, especially to the family. The church is a family. And so the point there is he's saying we do good, but especially we take care of those who are part of the faith, part of the family. We do that. We love them. Why? We take care of one another because we're a family, but we just don't take care of one another so we can take care of one another. We take care of each other. We do good for one another so that in turn, the good we do inside the walls can then be sent outside of the walls. And that's why I love that part where Paul says, let us do good to all people. Inherent in that is this. We do good to anyone who has a need. It doesn't matter if they believe like we do. It doesn't matter if they agree with us. It doesn't even matter if they're antagonistic towards the gospel and Jesus. If they need to be loved on, if they need good done to them in their life, then we go and we do it. And so the third thing you do is you give with no strings attached. And I got to tell you guys, okay? As a church, and I can brag, you all are known for that right there. You're known for that in this community. So many people tell me, man, the one thing we know about Pinnacle Church is you just love people and you love our town. I was sitting there the other day at J-Rose having a meal, and a guy who works at one of the high schools stops me and he says, hey man, I just got to tell you. I said, what? He said, you guys take such good care of us. You're always doing something for the staff. You're always doing things. And we just so appreciate that. And he said, and we know you do it. It's not because you're trying to get something from any of us. You just do it because you care. I said, thanks, man. I had one of my students. She doesn't live here anymore. She lives in Atlanta. When this disaster first happened, I noticed on Facebook, she starts telling everybody she knows, she's like, hey, if you're going to give stuff somewhere, if you're going to give supplies, if you're going to give money, she said, you need to take it to Pinnacle Church. She doesn't go to church here. She lives in Atlanta. I mean, we've talked and stuff. I'm not quite sure where she's at with our faith now. But I do know, she said, here's what she said. She said, you take it to those folks and they'll love on people with it. No strings attached. And I went, wow, that says something. It says something. And so that's what we want to do. That's what we want to be about. Why? We are for people that way because Jesus is for people. And when we, as a church, when we can do that, as you have done so many times, you tear down the walls, you show people that Jesus is irresistible, and people begin to come to faith. It may take a while, but they do. One thing that I've been so blown away by, and this is for all the churches in our area, as they've loved on a community, as Asheville's been devastated, is how people, I've seen it, I have friends this way, people who want nothing to do with our faith, people who even are antagonistic toward Christianity, have suddenly had their mind rocked because the people, when they desperately needed it the most, who first showed up, were followers of Jesus. And that says something. I'm grateful for the aid that comes from all kinds of different aid organizations. I'm grateful for the government. I'm grateful for all that, right? But before they ever got here, it was neighbors and churches that were loving on people because they're for people. And that says something. So all I'm going to say, church, is just keep doing what you do. Keep being for this community. Let's pray. Father, as we take the time now just to pause, I pray, God, that this has challenged us. And for some of us, God, I pray it's changed us. Lord, I know in the past few weeks, so many emotions have been swirling around. And now some of us are at the point where God, we're tired. And so, God, may we take a hold of what you've said here. May we understand that all that we do is good and it's for a reason. But that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to rest. It's okay to feel. It's okay to deal with these emotions. But God, help us to work through them, knowing, God, that you love us and you care for us. God, I'm grateful for our church. I'm grateful that we have a body of people who get what it means to love a community. We love you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, I love you guys. We're going to be having a communion next week. It's going to be a little different. Come out for that. It's going to be a very sweet time. And you guys go have a great day, and I'll see you next week. See y'all.